Um, Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you guys all so much for being here and for joining us for our third week of our A Mind to Know You series. While we've had a lot of speakers and topics that we've been really excited about so far in this series, and we have a couple more as well to come. I think that this is one that we as campus ministers were particularly excited about, particularly because we know how relevant this question is to so many of our students. The question of what is the relationship between faith and science, and how can I kind of communicate that relationship to my peers at the university? Um, so we're really excited to welcome our panelists, and in just a second, I'm going to give them all an opportunity to introduce themselves. But we will begin, as we should begin all things, in prayer, and in the prayer largely that inspired this series. So let's join together in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Grant me, O Lord my God, a mind to know you, a heart to seek you, wisdom to find you, conduct pleasing to you, faithful perseverance in waiting for you, and a hope of finally embracing you. Amen. Father and Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. Well, again, thank you guys all so much for being here. We're so excited to welcome our four panelists today. And rather than introducing them myself, just our first question to each of you guys will be, would you please just give us a quick introduction of yourself? Let us know a little bit about your background and how you came to be in the position that you hold right now. I'll leave it to you guys to decide who would like to answer first.
Well, I guess I unmuted myself first, so I'll speak first. My name is Mark DeGeer, and I'm on the faculty of the Case School of Engineering in Department of Materials Science and Engineering. And I've been on the faculty there for 33 years. And I think that's what you had in mind in terms of how we got to be where we are right now. Talk about my faith upbringing later, I guess.
Yes, that's perfect, Mark. Thank you.
I'm Brother Guy Consolmagno. I'm the director of the Vatican Observatory, so I'm an astronomer, undergraduate and graduate degrees from MIT in Arizona. I'm originally from Detroit, and I entered the Jesuits thinking that I was going to be teaching at a small Jesuit college. I was nearly 40 when I entered. But under obedience, they ordered me to go to Rome and eat that terrible food and look at that boring scenery and do full-time research, which is what I've been doing for nearly 30 years.
Hi, my name is Claudia. I am originally from Mexico. I did my MD there and a master's on science education. I came to the United States as a calling. Also, I became a doctor as a calling. I can tell you that story later. And here I finished my master's in clinical research, and I was doing my PhD on artificial intelligence in healthcare. And I am also doing my master's in theology at the seminary. And I am a full-time physician researcher at 2 hospitals here in Cleveland.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Gabriel Mariba. I'm a clinical psychologist. Earned my doctorate at Divine Mercy University and undergraduate work at American University. I actually wanted to be a diplomat before I became a psychologist, and now I practice in Cleveland. Hello.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And Sarah Jesse, I believe you have our first question for the panel.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of, I know Claudia mentioned sort of a calling. So I wonder if you could share a little piece of that, of your work that you do, and maybe how you kind of integrate faith into your daily work.
Hi, very like honored to be here. I think so. As a doctor, I have come to, like in my short time as a physician, scientist, and human, I have learned that the best in the field, like my teachers and mentors I have ever have, always taught me to recognize my limits and find strength on them. I think recognizing my own limitation has been the first step of gaining knowledge. If we fear failing, we will never be open to new things. And recognizing that only God possesses all the knowledge in the world. However, He shares that knowledge with us, and He relies on our will to be open to receive it and use it towards what is good and truth. And just to not let our degrees deceive us from who we are in the first place, children of God in a body and a soul.
And to build
That-
on that, because that's absolutely, where I'm starting from. But I had a long history before I was a Jesuit in the field of planetary science, getting NASA grants and things like that. The thing that I discovered was if you're doing science for recognition, for the pat on the head from your advisor, to get a better grant, to get a better position, to get, what the world calls success, it tastes like ashes in your mouth. You have to do the science ultimately for the joy it brings you. It doesn't mean that it's fun every day, but there is an underlying joy, which is the presence of God. And if you've lost that sense of joy, you've lost the reason for why you're doing it. And if you've lost the reason for doing science, then it is a really miserable job to have.
Just to piggyback on what Brother Guy said about the joy, we are people of joy, and we're also people of peace. That's the first thing that Jesus says to the apostles post-resurrection: peace be with you. And so integrating my work and my faith, that's the only way I can work, because living the faith is in everything we do, especially if for those of us who are impressed with Teresa's little way, every little act can be offered to God. Every little act can be done with care. Answering an email, talking to a patient for 45 straight minutes. It just becomes inseparable from the very air you breathe. But really having joy and that sense of calm, that peace, I try to bring that in every little moment that I can. I feel miserable with my kids. Sometimes I holler at them when I shouldn't, but for the most part, I think that's one concrete way to integrate faith and professional work. Just every little thing is done for the glory and honor of God, no matter how small or mundane. But to do it with peace and joy, otherwise it comes off the wrong.
And I can say that I was born Catholic, raised Catholic. Also, my family highly valued education, and also they were very concerned that I would have a job and be able to support a family. So that sort of, I was good in math, good in science, liked school. And so I went into engineering, got a PhD at MIT. I didn't really start embracing faith along with, my personal growth and development until I was an undergraduate. And, what draws me to science is not just learning what we already know is true in science, but also discovering new truth and deepening our understanding. When I also started realizing I could direct that same level of inquiry and love of truth and the foundation of faith in reason, that became a very powerful unifying force in my intellectual life, in my spiritual life, in my family life. And that journey is not over yet by any means.
And if I could just add one thing to what Mark said, it reminds us that science is not getting the answers in the back of the book. Science is learning the stuff we don't know. And the same should also be true of our faith. Our faith isn't living according to a bunch of rules that somebody else worked out in the past. It's an adventure of finding God in new and surprising ways and discerning what really is from God and what isn't. And that means it's never boring. But I think the parallels between the two, you never expect what you're going to discover. You're always surprised by it, whether it's God or science.
That's really beautiful. Thank you. So the next question that we have is, how do you encounter colleagues or friends who are unkind regarding your faith and spirituality? And how have you reconciled that or seized the moment for evangelization or teaching?
I think being a Catholic scientist is kind of like the best things. It's like the best icebreaker in the world because, people just like get shocked and then you just tell them the truth. You just show them like why like faith, reason, and science, all of them are a gift of God's grace, and then you just invite them, like, what is it that you want to know about this? What is it that you want to know about what I do? And, it's just like finding Christ in them. Like, where is like Jesus in their life? Where are they at right now? So I think that's, some people can be sometimes unkind and rude, but it's what a reflection of where their soul is at the moment. So it's kind of finding to get them to get that joy out of their hearts and just bringing Jesus out of their hearts and just get them excited about who Jesus is and what he means, for example, to me.
I think it was Michael Buckley who said that in order to be an atheist, you have to have a really clear idea of the God it is you don't believe in. Otherwise, how do you know you don't believe in them? And so a point of contact is that there are an awful lot of versions of God that I don't believe in either. I only believe in one God. And in many ways, we're united in not believing in a lot of other versions of God. So rather than saying that, we're opposed to each other, in many ways, we're both united in not believing in the God who has everything on a string and controls the entire universe and gives us no freedom, or a God who's only interested in punishing rather than loving. So that's actually a great point of contact.
Hopefully, getting rid of the video will help with my slow audio issues. I find that, well, one, just being a gentleman in the workplace, regardless of faith traditions, will really cut down the amount of hostility that is thrown in my direction. I actually have never really encountered any overt anti-Catholicism in any of my work environments, because I go to great lengths to be a professional and be a gentleman. But when it comes to explaining my faith, whenever I've had to, I've learned to describe my faith in an informative yet disinterested way, as if I'm explaining the difference between CBT or interpersonal therapy. And whenever, the topic of comparative religion comes up, again, very ho-hum, this is what Hindus believe, this is what Catholics believe, this is what our Protestant brothers believe. I find if I'm calm during this explanation, they're calm and they're much more receptive to this exchange of ideas. But if I'm a jerk interpersonally, then it's all going to fall apart. So that's a good way to just cut down on the hostility. You want to show that you're one of the adults in the room. That's what I find.
And I can't say that I've encountered much opposition to my faith. I think all my colleagues know where I'm at, and I heard a lot of things that Gabriel said that resonated with me. If you live kindness and respect, if you see dignity in every person that you encounter, people notice. And whether they can quite put their finger on it or not, I think they realize that there's something more holding this person together than just my next meal or my next proposal or my next lecture.
One of the things that's happened to me is an awful lot of my colleagues, when I became a Jesuit, started telling me about the churches they went to. I had no idea that they were people of faith. And so that was a great surprise. One of the funniest things happened when I was doing my philosophy studies in Chicago. And I was visiting a colleague in my field at the University of Chicago who's had a reputation of being hard-nosed and sort of, very, very snide and all of that. And I mentioned I'm in Chicago studying to be a Jesuit. I could feel the temperature in the room drop about 10 degrees. So I was making my, gradual retreat. Nice to see you. Okay. And just as I'm about to leave, he goes, "Were you always Catholic?" And I go, "Yeah, Italian dad, Irish mom, comes with the territory." And suddenly he was real friendly again. And a few minutes later was inviting me to come and talk to his synagogue. And it suddenly dawned on me, in those days, all the bits that are gray used to be red. I had curly red hair, and he thought I was Jewish. And he thought I had left Judaism to become a Jesuit, which is why he was so upset. It wasn't that he was anti-religion, but that he was in fact very devoted to his religion. So you can be surprised that way.
Thank you all. I think I have the next question too. So have you ever been accused of being less intelligent for being a faithful person who works in the sciences? And if so, how have you responded? I know some of my students have encountered that with their peers. And I think they'd love to know kind of how you deal with that.
Honestly, I have never encountered that, but I'll think about that for a second.
I think that honestly, the last time I encountered that was as an undergraduate, and it was my roommate from Kentucky. Not that I have anything against Kentucky, but he was from Kentucky. And so basically, I think once you enter certain professional circles, it's very unseemly to do that. So basically, I mean, undergraduate courses are in many ways an extension of high school immaturity. And so they might as well just put a kick me sign behind me. But no, in the last 10 years, no one's ever, my children will sometimes question my intelligence, but that's it. No one else.
And likewise, people know my credentials. I got my doctorate at MIT and a bachelor's and master's at the University of Illinois. maybe it was when I was an adolescent, but I can't even think of a time when people said, you believe in, you have faith, you believe in God, or you must be losing your marbles. And in fact, sometimes intelligence, I don't know, might mask that. Sometimes maybe people assume that, this person doesn't have a faith life. He's an intellectual just like me. I've been attending the other events here, and we went into a breakout room last week. And for me, some of the most beautiful testimonials about faith were coming from some of the undergraduate students who were in the room with me. And it wasn't that they were theologically trained, but just their profession of belief in, even during times of doubt and times of fear. To me, that they were very moving and very convincing. So I think for any young people who are experiencing harassment, which is what it amounts to, just know that you've got God on your side, and take strength in that. And if the other person just doesn't get it, pray for that person.
Yeah, I do think it's a real kind of an undergraduate thing. The last time I can remember that was when I was an undergraduate at MIT, and a kid from the South who had, been raised very strictly and had left it was, challenged me after a class when it had come up. And I said, so he said, oh, they told me when I was, growing up that if I left the church, all sorts of terrible things had happened to me. Well, like what? Well, I'd wind up doing drugs and hanging out with loose women. I go, well, were they right? And he goes, yeah. But I think it really goes back to what Gabriel was saying. You treat people with humor, you treat people with respect, you treat them where they are. And I do think that there's a much greater sense now of an appreciation of diversity, so that if you've got a friend who's a Muslim, you go, oh, that's fun. And you got a friend who's a Mormon, oh, that's fun. In some ways, it means they don't take it as seriously anymore, but it also means that I think the hostility is less than it was a generation ago.
I just want to add that, if somebody just tell you that you must be doing something right, so just keep at it, keep like your faith strong, and don't feel sad or bad. Just rejoice maybe that little consolation, and as Mark said, just like pray for them so they can have that joy in their hearts that you're experiencing every day.
And I also hang around with a lot of engineers. I think engineers, they just seem more tolerant than other branches of academia. And I think it's because my faith is based in evidence. To me, I've never seen any contradiction between faith and reason, faith and science. In fact, the more I learn, the more I realize how intertwined they are. So maybe, even engineers who are atheistic, they say, well, this other engineer must be working off of some kind of evidence, and I'll respect that.
Sometimes it helps if and maybe even if we challenge to remind people of the number of people of faith who have been in the sciences and engineering in the past. Some names that everybody knows if they know the Big Bang Theory was invented by a Catholic priest, George Lemaitre. Less well known is that anybody who's got electronic equipment is probably someplace it says this many amps, this many volts. And Volta and Ampere were both very devout Catholics.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for your answers to that question. John, I think that you have the next question for our panelists.
Yes, I do. How can we respond to a worldview that is based exclusively on scientific materialism and leaves no room for faith or religion? what happened?
I'll jump on this one first. I think that if you really are having a deep discussion with somebody, it's important to point out to them that, in fact, the science we do is based on more than science. To choose which problem you're going to work on requires a sense of, something that a computer cannot come up with. To choose how you're going to approach the problem, to choose which theory seems the most elegant, which explanation is the most beautiful. Why is it that I'm willing to spend this amount of time? Because of the joy I get. Science is, and engineering is, it's a liberal art. It is something that engages the whole human being. And someone will eventually try to argue that there is no such thing as beauty. Beauty is only what little old grandmothers told you was beautiful. They wind up talking themselves into corners, and at that point you have to be very sympathetic, because my experience is that most people who did that were fairly along in the Asperger's syndrome and have a hard time expressing and understanding the non-rational things that make life worthwhile: the joy, the beauty, the love.
I had a pivotal experience a couple of years into my faculty time at Case Western Reserve University. I had a chance to meet a solid state physicist whose work I had become very familiar with while I was doing my PhD work at MIT. And I happened to know that this person had done the work that I was reading not far from MIT. And just every paper I read opened up brilliant new insights into solid state matter. And I got to meet this person. Gee, it would now be about 30 years ago. His name was John Goodenough. And my department chairman wangled the invitation to lunch. So I got to have lunch with John Goodenough. He was a brilliant speaker. I knew he had a brilliant intellect. And somehow our lunch conversation led him to say, and why is it that some scientists think that the only truths are scientific truths? I remember it vividly, and we talked a bit about that. And it just unlocked a bunch of unanswered questions that I'd had in my head for so long, like, why on every corner of the globe, when someone is happy, does that person smile? That person could be, indigenous in the African outback. It could be a newborn baby in San Francisco. Why do humans smile? And yeah, I know the physiologists and the biologists could tell me all about which muscles and which nerves and where in the brain the signals are sent out. But that just takes it to the deeper question: why smile? And it was clear to me that this was the truth, the essence of that. The answer to that question was not a scientific question at all. It got to the existence of the human soul. And so fast forward to the fall of 2019, and who shared the Nobel Prize in chemistry with two other scientists for their work on lithium-ion batteries? John Goodenough. So it's not like he needed to win a Nobel Prize for me to realize that he was brilliant and also a person of deep faith. But I just felt like I wanted to share that fact with all of you. There are Nobel Prize winners walking the earth today who are adamant advocates for Christian faith.
I mean, what I'm probably gonna say is not gonna be as deep as that, but I just want you to human beings are very complex. And overall, every research study that we make is gonna have some limitations just because they do. And I think a key aspect of like derived from addressing and testing hypotheses involving, like religion and science, is like understanding like the implications they bring, and maybe just like meditating on like how is this finding significant to the world, to our ministry, to our church? How does this glorify God? And also like, how does this like help me grow in my faith and in my relationship with God? Because we can only find truth when all the players have been considered. And the main player in everything is God. So we have to interpret everything in his light and in his love and in his beauty and what he brings to the table every day.
Sometimes when I'm confronted with someone who takes that strict materialistic view of the world, only what I can perceive is what exists, I wonder the motivation behind that, just because I deal with emotions and motivations. And sometimes it's as simple as being rather uncomfortable with the idea of being held accountable for our deeds and misdeeds. So it's not always coming from a place of science, so to speak.
All right, thank you all. I think Nate, you have our next question.
Yes, sir. So, Brother Guy, we want to know: are we still looking for intelligent life out there beyond the Earth? And if so, what would be the implications for our faith if we were to discover intelligent life somewhere else other than the Earth?
Well,
have you read
conveniently enough, it's such a good book, you should buy 2 copies. The great thing is, it's one of those questions that doesn't have an answer. But in the process of asking the question, you start to ask yourself, what does intelligence mean? How do I recognize it? What is the human soul? And the title of the book is When You Baptize an Extraterrestrial. What does baptism mean? And those are questions that don't come up with simple answers. Yeah, there are questions that are kind of boring. Do I have enough money in my pocket to buy a candy bar? And the answer is yes or no. But the other question is, why do I want chocolate, and which candy bar do I want? And, that changes with time. That's a deeper question. So the question of asking about intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, I see Sarah Rose is holding a little baby. And that little baby is discovering that there are babies other than himself or herself. And that is a tremendous discovery. And we're always looking for other people. I think that as a human species, we're looking for other creatures with intellect and free will. And whether or not we find them in our lifetime, the search itself tells us something about who we are in relationship to the universe and the creator of the universe. Chesterton has a marvelous phrase someplace where he says, nature is not our mother, nature is our sister. And we're both children of the same father. And we should treat nature as a little sister who, is just a heck of a lot of fun to be around. Someone that we love and maybe can laugh at times.
I think about, the search for intelligent life in the universe. And I figure if there's a truth to be discovered, never fear the truth. Because truth can only come from God, right? Maybe it will turn a page in our understanding. But that's also part of the scientific approach too, right? Trust your data, trust your evidence, and don't be afraid of what it might tell you, even if it's not what you expected.
Thank you guys so much. And how fortuitous, Brother Guy, that you had a book on your desk, of which we should buy 2 copies. Everybody hear that? Buy 2 copies, right?
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Our next question came from one of our students, and it's something that you kind of touched on a little bit, but I think it's got a little bit more of a specific bend to it. How would you guys respond to someone who says either that religious ideas or religious things are only made up by humans to help explain natural events, or that the seemingly miraculous events in the scriptures can be explained by science alone? The examples that they gave are that maybe an earthquake caused a split in the Red Sea, or that mental illness explains demonic possession. How would you respond to people who have those sort of criticisms of our faith-based view of the universe?
They're absolutely right. Most people don't know what a miracle is. And in the last, several hundred years since the Enlightenment, the word miracle has been hijacked to mean something that violates the laws of nature. But we were talking about miracles long before we talked about laws of nature. A miracle is a sign that points us to God. And laws of nature are invented human explanations for what's going on in the world. And they're pretty darn marvelous. And in their beauty, they're signs that point us to a God who is rational and beautiful. So I wouldn't disagree with them, except that they're misunderstanding what it is when I say that I believe in a miracle. One of the great things in science is the principle, if it did happen, it can happen. And when you apply that to the amazing things that we hear about in our faith, including the resurrection, that's the whole glory of the resurrection. Because it did happen, it can happen. That's why we have hope. That's why we, have a faith that's more than just Jesus was a nice guy. And that sense that, no, it's not impossible because it did happen. And miracles are by definition things that happen and therefore are not impossible.
In terms of demonic possession being explained by mental illness, clearly the person asking the question is ignorant of how modern day possessions are investigated. The first line of defense is talk to a psychiatrist or a psychologist to rule it out. And I think there are at least 5, maybe more, definitive signs of demonic possession, one of which is the very unsettling presence of evil that you feel permeate, in the room. Another one, I won't go through all of them, but another one is the possessed will have detailed knowledge of you that they have no business knowing. Again, unsettling. And so it's interesting that, again, psychiatry and psychology aid in the investigation process of the possessed. So clearly the person doesn't know what they're talking about.
I think, yeah, like it was what you both say is kind of like what I think. I have encountered like this type of like questions actually before, and like, how do you like explain these things? And the first thing I do is like ask the person like, how do you understand these things? Because if you like, you gotta like understand like what the person has in their head and like where are they coming from, like why are they thinking, because sometimes like it's a misconception of what they have in their lives, and it's just like guiding them and just like teaching them what the truth is, and just like not necessarily, because it's like hard to like communicate with somebody if the true meaning of what they are asking is not the same for both parties. So I think my first reaction when somebody asks me that, I always ask them like, what do you mean by this? How do you what's the concept that you have from these things that you are like asking me, and then I can see where they are coming from, and I can just further explain, or like just tell them like it goes this way instead of this way.
I wonder if the question might also mean, so why does Christianity have all these unlikely events like a virgin birth and a resurrection from the dead? Is that the kind of skepticism that the question is getting at?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Well, and being a rational person myself, I have heard the arguments that, yeah, but it's all a fairy tale because those things can't happen, and I can't believe in a virgin birth any more than I can believe in a fairy godmother. Well, I look at it differently, that God put everything in motion. God created the physical laws, and yet God also wants to communicate with us. And I see miracles like the virgin birth and the resurrection and the transubstantiation that happens at every consecration as the Creator's way of really getting our attention. Said, okay, if you're not completely in awe of the universe and the rain and the physical laws, I'm going to show you that I can stop them. I can change them if it's really important enough. And to me, that makes perfectly good sense. To the extent that this human mind can comprehend God, I would think a God like that would occasionally get our attention with a miracle.
Just to like add like something to like what Mark said like beautifully, is that I mean, humans and the universe don't exist just because. We're not just a consequence of a mere coincidence, but a tangible expression of God's love. And the universe holds its own mystery and inexplicability. However, this is not an argument for the existence of God, but for the limits of our own humanity and our own understanding of things. Like, we think that God acts like we would, but that's not how it works.
Because I think one of the things you're pointing at is the people who say these sorts of things aren't, in a sense, looking for the God of the gaps. That here is something that I can't understand. That's why I believe in God. Oh, wait a minute. Now I understand it. Therefore, I don't need to believe in God anymore. And that's not where our belief in God comes from. And that's not what it's dependent upon. And that's not the God who we believe in. And, there is nothing more miraculous than love. And I don't know any laws of physics that can, describe it or explain it. And yet that is where we find God.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing on that question. Mark, I really loved like that image of God saying like, well, if the beauty that I have in the universe as it functions normally is not enough for you to see me, let me just interrupt that for a second and you can see me in those moments as well. I thought that was a really, really beautifully put. The next question we had actually kind of follows forth from that, and it's maybe a big one. Have any of you guys had an experience of something that you would describe, whether in your work or just in your life, had an experience of something that you would describe as miraculous or a miracle?
I would say many. I think just at the top of my head, we had this patient, 45-year-old guy who had terminal pancreatitis. Like his stats were dropping. He was bleeding internally, and then he was living in the city. His family was living like on the other side of the world, and he was praying that, God, please, I just want to see them. And then his family arrived within 24 hours. He was very ill, and then it took an embracing of all of them, his wife and his children. And then he was healed. Like, we can't explain it, like, but he was healed. And that was like very tangible. So that's number one. I have a bunch of more. That's number one.
I remember reading somewhere where Mother Teresa talked about the spiritual poverty of the West is the bigger tragedy than whatever material poverty is in other countries. And so for me, again, going back to a miracle is a sign that points us to God. Just a simple psychotherapy session where I had this gentleman, years and years of resentment toward his father, who actually kept his identity secret from his son. This is sort of it's going to mess you up. Your godfather is actually your father, but for the sake of hiding the affair, we're not going to reveal this to the son. Now he's in his 40s. The moment that he understood the concept of forgiveness and letting someone off the hook is kind of a colloquial way to describe it. And how often do we want to be let off the hook, and how grateful we are when someone does. He has the power to do that to his father. When the moment I saw the resentment leave his heart, to me, that was a miracle.
I like to say that, you don't expect that you're going to be able to cure a failing hard drive by laying on of hands. That's, not how God operates. Until the one time I had a failing hard drive and just prayed, and suddenly it survived and worked just fine. And I had this sense of God laughing at me saying, yeah, I know you go around telling people that doesn't happen, but I can do that too.
Well, and I don't think I've ever witnessed something that would qualify as miraculous, but I have had a prayer answered almost immediately. My wife and I were heading to our first job post PhD work, from driving across upstate New York from Boston to Cleveland in a very, very old car that I had done my best to keep running for a long period of time, but in the frigid winter of February, I think 2000, well, no, it was 1987. The spark, they started losing power, sparks coming out the tailpipe. We had a 2-year-old daughter in a car seat in the back, and I pulled off to the road and to the side of the road, and we just started praying. I don't think we finished a first Hail Mary before a state trooper pulled up right behind us. And was that supernatural? No. Was it an answer to a prayer? Yes.
I had a spiritual director who had the marvelous phrase, divine coincidence. And I think an awful lot of the answers to prayers are exactly that. Yes, they're coincidence, but they're divine because they came at just when we needed them.
Thank you, guys. Those are really beautiful. So the next question would be, how do you see ethics playing out in your field? If we were to prescribe a Catholic perspective to that, what would that look like?
Well, psychology has an ethics code that, has been developed for years now. It's been pretty much cemented. And the list, when you read through it, it's pretty thorough. The problem is when a field starts to violate its own ethics code. And You know, I don't want to get too off topic, but you know, an ethics code that's going to recognize the dignity of each and every individual, which the APA ethics code does a pretty good job in doing, and but also understanding that, you know, there are certain treatments that violate that dignity, that go too far. I think the big elephant in the room in the field of psychology, it tends to deal with questions of sexual behavior and gender identity and certain aggressive treatments of hormone therapy and cosmetic surgery done to reproductive organs. This is highly problematic. And I guess the only thing I'd want to add to that is when it comes from a treatment sort of point of view, which is the best treatment options, the lobotomy was once considered a cutting edge treatment in the field of psychiatry and psychology. And in 1950, the psychiatrists and psychologists and physicians of the Soviet Union said it was inhumane, and they outlawed it in 1950. And I think maybe in the next 10 years or so, who knows, that some of these aggressive treatments might also fall out of favor, but we'll see.
Now, astronomy is about as passive and remote from human contact as you think. And yet, even in astronomy, we have issues of ethics that are really important and all too often not, understood. Every telescope is built on top of a mountain, and that mountain belongs to somebody and then belonged to somebody else before then. And when we built our telescope in Arizona, we had to deal with the problem of were we violating, the sacredness of indigenous peoples? And the answer was, it's more complicated than you think, because there are 18 different tribes and they all had different opinions. And one of the deepest parts of ethics that I think is very Catholic is to recognize that no matter how good your intentions, there will be bad results, unintended bad results, always. And that we are fallen, and that we will make mistakes, and that other people who are fallen will make mistakes. And we have to be brave enough both to recognize that they're mistakes and recognize that they're good people, and be willing to admit our own faults and forgive ourselves so that we can forgive others whose faults are a whole lot easier for us to see. That, I think, is a part of the ethics of doing science that is very Catholic and something that I think every field of science desperately needs.
Just to add a little bit to that, like ethics just play a major part in like everything that I do, like in research and clinic. And it's just breaking the path of like that path, like passing that inability or unwillingness to dig deeper into like passing your own ego and actually finding the truth. And like in understanding that we cannot know everything about everything, only God does, but that we are not individual beings, we're not an island. We are part of a bigger community, and that's why we have other people that we can rely on, people who can tell us, hey, stop, and be humble enough to listen to that and say, okay, people are calling out to me and telling me that's not right. Why is that? And just like being open to have that conversation, I think is a big step towards improving like the ethics and the morals in what we do. Because what we do is not, it's a calling from God, it's a ministry, and we should treat it as such.
Thank you so much for those answers. We have a question that it's kind of broad, but I think it might give you an opportunity to sum up kind of nicely for this evening. We want to know, how do you see your work serving the common good and or the mission of the church, both local and universal? If we're talking about faith and science, yeah, just how do you see your work serving the common good or the mission of the church?
Well, I've been fortunate that in the last 10 years or so, my knowledge of materials engineering dovetailed with my passion of using our resources wisely. When I was a kid, it was ecology and air pollution is bad, water is bad, or water pollution is bad. Well, now it's the question of sustainability. It's really just the same question put in different forms. And I've never been more interested in my scientific work when I realized I could, part of my job could be studying how to produce electricity more efficiently with lower carbon footprint. And I developed a brand new course in my department on materials and engineered materials, both being as consumers of the world's resources and also as potential polluters of the world's resources, but also potential solutions to problems. And so I consider that, it's tied in with my personal ethics. It's tied in with what I do. I know it also enables me to answer questions that maybe not the average layperson or the average policymaker or can answer. So it helped me focus on the really crucial role of science and engineering in providing reliable facts, and then let the policymakers and the politicians and the sociologists decide what policies are really going to work. But if they don't have good facts and good numbers and good physical and chemical understanding of the problems, they can't make good laws and good policies. So I see that as, I can put it in non-religious terms, but for me, it definitely supports my faith life as well.
I believe we have one or two more questions. Thank you, Mark. I believe we have one or two more questions to go. Sarah Jesse, were you next for those?
Yep. So this kind of touches on more specific, some of the moral teachings of the church that people might find to be unscientific. So for example, teachings on artificial contraception or stem cell research. And I wonder how you would respond to a criticism that the church is unscientific.
Well, there's a difference between whether something is possible and whether it's a good idea. And Gabriel's broached that before. No one disputes the theory of atomic fusion that explains how an H-bomb works. But we can argue about whether building and using H-bombs is a good idea. And as long as, I think a lot of that comes from a misunderstanding of, the Galileo affair, that the church was mad at Galileo. Everything you know about Galileo is wrong. The truth doesn't make the church look better, but it's not what people think it is. And actually, to go back to the other question, which I wanted to give a little bit of an answer, and I was trying to years ago, when I was 30 years old, I was a researcher at MIT and worried about the moons of Jupiter and wondering that night, why am I worried about the moons of Jupiter when people are starving in the world? And I didn't have an answer to that. So I quit my postdoc job and I went and joined the Peace Corps and wound up serving in Africa. And I discovered that people in Africa wanted to know about space. They wanted to look through my telescope. That's the telescope I took to Africa with me. Because they're human beings and because we don't live by bread alone. And that means that it's not just the facts. Mark put it beautifully that we need to know the facts, but then we need to go the step beyond that. And we need the sociologists and the politicians and the economists to say, all right, given these facts, who are we and what do we do with them? So it's important to know how stem cells work. And it's also important to know that maybe there are things I don't want to do to get at this stuff. I love space. I love flying things in space. I'm real worried about millionaires who are putting up so many satellites in space that suddenly I can't see the stars anymore for all the streaks of light they put up. Just because you can do something doesn't mean it's a good idea. Because we're more than human beings who build tools, we're also human beings who decide how to use those tools.
Well, for me and
Yep.
for my wife, that question about the church's teaching on birth control, initially we were both skeptical, but we read and we prayed and we talked to people about it, and came to understand that the church's teaching is profoundly rooted in the nature of recreation, God's relationship to us, that God even gives us a role in creating new life. It means God is sharing the Creator's power with His people. The spiritual side, but also the science that is based on family planning that respects the way we're made. So my wife and I became teachers of natural family planning, and we taught other young couples for 20 years, hundreds of couples, how they could observe the signs of fertility that God built into all of us, and then respecting God's plan, use that knowledge to decide whether we should seek to achieve pregnancy or whether we should postpone pregnancy. It just became more than just scientific facts, and all of that natural family planning is based on beautiful science. It deepened my appreciation for not just procreation, but the role of sexual intercourse in human life and the dignity of it. And if the church's teaching had not been there, I don't think I would have ever thought as deeply as I did about these things. And it's sort of a microcosm of my whole faith life. It wasn't just one moment, one turning point. It's just been a continual exposure of how intricately faith and reason and science were all bound together by our Creator. So that was a case where the science and the faith just reinforce each other.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Just like coming to a deeper understanding that everything that we have, everything who we are, is a gift. And coming to recognize that gift in every little thing that we are and how we interact with each other. It's part of understanding our relationship with God, and how, like, using contraceptives, for example, or like IVF, like is that highlighting our true humanity? Is that highlighting what God created us to be? And I think that leads you to like understanding why this is right, or this is like the right teaching, and what is like the wrong thing to do becomes more clear as you understand who God created you to be.
Again, I can't help myself for finding perhaps a more carnal and simple explanation for someone who is against the church's teaching on contraception. I think it's rather simple. They like to have sex without condoms because it feels better. And, you know, to show self-control in the sexual arena is not something that is popular these days. And if you read letters of St. Peter, I don't think it was ever popular. Here he is saying you can't be drunk and you can't participate in drunken orgies. And I'm reading the letter to St. Peter, or by St. Peter, and I'm saying, this is steamy. I have to put it down. 50 Shades of Peter. And so it's really, I think to some extent, it really is that simple. Just, I don't want to, because doing it my way feels better for the short term.
Thank you guys so much for your answers to that question. And thank you guys so much for this whole conversation. We are a little bit over time right now, but we just so appreciate all of our panelists for fielding these questions. I think it was really a really wonderful conversation. I know that I enjoyed it, and I'm sure my colleagues and all of our students did just as much as I did. Thank you guys so much for being here. And students, thank you so much for coming and for sharing your questions with us as well. I believe that we got to all of the questions that our students did ask. So hope that you found them to be helpful answers for you guys. We will be continuing the series next week. We'll be inviting in JD Flynn, I believe, to talk about, as we've talked kind of about our use of our individual reason and our individual ability to applying the principles of science. We're going to be talking next week about how the authority that the church has fits into that, and then how that ties to ecumenism or relating to other non-Catholic Christian denominations. So we're looking forward to that conversation as well. With that said, our time together has come to an end. So John, will you lead us in a closing prayer?
Yes, I do have a prayer. And keeping with the feast day of St. Patrick, I found a prayer for the faithful by him. So if we could just center ourselves and listen. May the strength of God guide us. May the power of God preserve us. May the wisdom of God instruct us. May the hand of God protect us. May the way of God direct us. May the shield of God defend us. May the angels of God guard us against the snares of the evil one. May Christ be with us. Christ be before us. May Christ be in us. Christ be over all. May thy grace, Lord, always be ours this day, O Lord, and forevermore. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you guys all again so much. Thank you, John, and we wish you all a great rest of your week.